This is the bread ministry.
It looks like it says
we're live on YouTube.
What'd you say, Roger?
It says we're live on YouTube.
Now we don't need to sign in or anything, right?
Yeah, I see it.
So if you click on the one that says live on YouTube, it has a drop down on it, Clarissa. It'll say copy stream link or view stream on YouTube. So I just clicked on that.
So which one do we want? The one that says live on YouTube?
Live on YouTube. Yes, and it's up on I have it up on a big TV screen, and it looks clear.
Great.
Now we don't need to sign in or anything, right?
Yeah, I see it.
So if you click on the one that says live on YouTube, it has a drop down on it, Clarissa. It'll say copy stream link or view on. I got to stop it because it starts repeating in my head. Starts repeating it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. I know that I think you also were telling me this too. Rabbi Braver said that it has about a 20-second delay on YouTube.
Yeah, about 20 to 30-second delay.
Was this in a high risk for fracture? Now might not be the best time to ask yourself, am I bone strong? Risk of fracture. Prolia is proven to help strengthen and protect bones from fracture with one shot every 6 months.
Can people mute themselves who are not needing to speak about YouTube? Because I'm hearing a television.
I'm hearing somebody's TV.
I'm sorry, that's my TV.
Well, good evening. I'm Gary Lay. I'm here.
Want to be visible?
Not while I'm eating.
Okay, then go to the top right corner.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Ms. Marguerite.
Hello? Hello?
You're in the right place, I think.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello?
Hey, everybody. Reached the bread rally. There's no need for you to introduce yourselves here, but if you would just go in and rename yourself with your congregation name and your name, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
How do I do that?
Probably the chat line, is that what he's referring to?
No, it says rename yourself.
Off to
And
the right.
Cora's gonna do a brief Zoom overview in about 60 seconds here, right before we start. She's gonna do it 5 minutes before the top.
I don't think you quite got it. You should be able to see.
Yes,
Oh,
I
there
got
it
it.
is. There it is.
I'm looking at it.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Hi, Clarissa. This is Pearline.
All right.
Hello.
If you can mute yourselves, I'm about to do a little bit of Zoom introductions for those of you who this is new. So if you'll just give me 1 second, I'm going to pull this up. So, all right. Can everyone see that? Staff members, can you tell me?
We can see it.
Thank you. So Zoom, so throughout this meeting, we're going to want to make sure you're muted. And so I'm going to show you right here, if you can see my cursor down in the left-hand corner of your screen, you should see the little microphone that has a cross through it if it's muted, which is how we want you to be during this, so we don't have any background feedback. So we appreciate you doing that. Also, next to this unmute is the start video. You can turn your video on the whole time. Just make sure that everyone can see what you're doing. And so please keep that appropriate. If there's a time that you need to leave the room, you can turn off your camera. I can already hear someone who needs to unmute or to mute themselves. So if you could go down to the left-hand corner, make sure you are muted. And then we also want to make sure if we're showing a video, you might need to turn off your camera. That will help the video go smoother. So again, once you make sure you're muted, if there's a video playing and you're comfortable turning off your camera, right down there in the left-hand corner with the video, you can do that. And then I also want to point out, as you go to the right along the bottom, this is if you are on a computer, might look a little different on your phone. So you might need to select the more option. There might be 3 little dots with the word more, but you can see there's a little chat bubble. And when you click that, you can send a message out to everyone on the call. We want to make sure that we are only putting things when we are instructed, or if you do have a technical problem and you put that in the chat box, one of the staff members will answer that. So if everyone else on the call can just ignore any type of helping, we know that you're all very helpful, but we want to make sure that we don't have people getting distracted in the chat box. So if you have a tech question, put it in the chat. And if you are someone who knows what to do, please just refrain, because we have 4 staff members who will respond to that person. And that'll just help us run smoothly tonight. And so those are the only real functions that you'll need tonight. You do have the option up in the right-hand corner to adjust speaker view, or you can make it gallery view, so you can see all of the awesome justice seekers who are on this call tonight. So it's up to you if you want to have it on speaker view or gallery view. Again, that's up in the right-hand corner. And only use the chat box when instructed. If text questions are in the chat, please allow staff to assist. And again, please make sure you're muted throughout this entire event. You might be asked to turn off your camera, and you also might be asked to answer things in the chat, but just make sure that you're aware of yourself. And we're going to have a great rally here on Zoom. Please bear with us if there are any technical issues, but we're looking forward to getting started promptly at 7 p.m. Also, just a heads up, your agenda, and there's an information packet that was emailed to you in the same email that you received this Zoom link. So if you're on here right now, there's a good chance your team member or your organizer sent you this Zoom link, and there should have been an attachment, and that'll have the agenda if you want to follow along. If it's too hard to find, don't worry about it. We'll keep you informed on what's coming next. But again, please keep yourself muted during the assembly, and we look forward to getting started.
Or there's a question about how to rename yourself. Could you tell people how to do that?
Yes.
Yes, so you'll go down to participants and you'll click that and you should find your name. And then you just hover over that and it should give you the option to edit or to change. So you rename, sorry. So please just go over to the right-hand side of your participants and you can rename. And now I will turn it over to our
Good evening. My name is James Wynn. I'm a member of the Church of Christ on Genesee Avenue. I would like to call the 2021 rally to order. The last time we as network members met collectively was at the annual assembly in November. That night, we committed to continue our work for affordable housing, reducing gun violence, reducing the life expectancy gap among older adults, keeping children out of jail and in school through restorative practices, helping people feel safe with the municipal ID, and getting decent paying jobs for the most vulnerable. We also challenged ourselves to address local police brutality and over-policing. Tonight, we will hear updates on several of these campaigns as we prepare for the Nehemiah action on Tuesday, May 11th. As network members to build the people power necessary to win these important. So let's get ourselves ready to demand real justice. Now, before we Bread rises. Cathy, please.
The Bread organization is comprised of many different congregations who in turn represent many different traditions. Each of our congregations believes something different about the nature of God and the name of God. But each of us shares a commitment to pursue justice, CC, to offer words of prayer from the stream of her own faith tradition. We vow to respect each other for the things we share and for the ways that we.
It is you who has gathered us together here in this virtual space, this sacred space this evening, connecting us one to another in heart and spirit, and forming and reforming us as one people, as your people, inspired by our respective faith traditions and belief systems, and joined together as co-builders of the beloved community that is still yet to be. And so we come together this evening as seekers and doers of justice. We come together this evening to address the inequity and inequality that exists and persists throughout our community. We come together this evening that we would be equipped and empowered and emboldened to take meaningful and effective action. We come together this evening to seek this community where we all live and work and worship. This community, your holy name we pray. Amen.
Good evening.
Lonely.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, Noel. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rabbi Rick Kellner. I'm from Congregation Beth Tikva. Lonely sits the city atop the hill, once great with people. She that was great among the nations has become like a widow. And what of the people? They have fled and turned away, and they sat by the river and wept. But Jerusalem they would never forget. Jerusalem, a city that was home, a city that was a dream. Why was it destroyed? Didn't the prophets warn us? Micah called to us. Hear this, you rulers of the house of Jacob, you chiefs of the house of Israel, who detest justice and make crooked all that is straight, who build Zion with crime, Jerusalem with iniquity. Because of you, Zion shall be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become a heap of ruins, and the Temple Mount a shrine in the woods. Sitting by the river, the prophets came to comfort us, to tell us that our holy city would be restored. Every stone cast aside will be built into a wall again, days of old. But should we return to our days of old? COVID arrived like the foot soldiers of Nebuchadnezzar, tearing down the walls of everything we knew as good and comfortable. But was it? Instead of weeping by the waters of Babylon, we have wept in our homes by the waters of the Olentangy or the Scioto. We have lamented what was and the lives we once knew. We have been imprisoned in the narrow place of a plague we didn't want, nor did we ask for. We hear the phrase, "It is time to return to normal." Return to normal? Who are we? Are we the Israelites who wandered in the desert asking Moses to bring us back to Egypt? There was food and water there. Life was good, we thought. Was life good for us? We have this sense of nostalgia for what was, but should we? Nostalgia, writes Leslie Jameson, combines the Greek words nostos and algos, homecoming and pain. Nostalgia, she explains, can be a valid catalyst for gratitude and illuminating sources of sustenance. But without interrogation, it can also obscure the root systems of pain lurking beneath the romances of memory. However, she continued, were the times that good before? We must make a distinction between restorative and reflective nostalgia. Dr. Svetlana Boym teaches us restorative nostalgia wants to recreate the past. Reflective nostalgia interrogates the very image it longs for. Restorative nostalgia is drawn to monuments, and reflective nostalgia to ruins. Monuments are erected to honor those who establish the values that are passed on to the next generation. And ruins, they remind us of the pain and the suffering and the lessons we learned so that we did not build them again. Right now, we are building monuments in our city, monuments to the vision of life we once knew. But what we need is to reflect on the ruins and build a better future. Yet we have neglected the root causes of the problems we have seen, the disparities of the impact of COVID on communities of color, the inequity of a vaccine rollout that hurts people who don't have internet access or transportation. We have seen the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. In a year when thousands died of a virus you cannot see, we also saw more deaths from bullets that fly and move too fast for the eye to see, but are so loud that you can hear them. But do we all hear them? Too many neighborhoods don't, but their neighbors in the next neighborhood over do hear them. Why is it that we hear about the bullets that fly inside a mall, but we feel no outrage from the bullets that fly in neighborhoods where our neighbors live? We all heard about not one, but 2 shootings at Polaris Fashion Place in recent weeks. And we are living in a city that has now seen over 50 homicides this year. Why do we cry out over shootings in a mall, but so little over shootings that happen in certain zip codes? Remind me what we want to return to again? We want to return to a city with housing issues, with limited access to health care at a time when mental health needs have increased. We want to go back to a lack of access to mental health care. We want to go back to a Columbus police force that responds to non-dangerous calls with weapons rather than a team that can respond with concern, or times when people cannot afford to choose between the rent or food on the table or electricity. We want to return to a place where we build monuments to guns and mass shootings that are covered on cable news and even earlier today. Wouldn't it be better to turn monuments into keys to apartments that are affordable, or coins we could use to put food on the table? Nostalgia for what? We must build our lives again, but we must build these walls not with stones, but with values and with roadmaps and plans. When Nehemiah came to rebuild the walls in Jerusalem, what did he see? He wanted to undo all of the evil and the wickedness that led to the walls being torn down in the first place. There was a great outcry in Jerusalem. The people needed food. To feed themselves, they had to pawn off their fields and their vineyards and their homes to stave off hunger. They borrowed money against their fields to pay the king's tax. We know this story. We know that Nehemiah was angered by what he was hearing. He called on the nobles and the prefects, and he gathered the people so they could witness what they were doing to them. What you are doing is not right. You must act in God-fearing ways. Give them back their fields and their olive trees and their homes. Those leaders turned their hearts. What made them turn their hearts? After justice, you shall chase. We know these words from Deuteronomy. This translation by Mark Brettler is part of a letter of the faith communities writing to current administration each and every day, 100 religious voices expressing our vision and our concerns. But Brettler adds that we should be tired from a sprint, but we have to keep running and to call out and redress injustice wherever we may find it. How will we build this city once again? What is the prophetic voice that calls to us? We need a voice at this time of rebuilding, the voice of Zechariah, who echoed the call of Micah. What does God ask of you? To do justice and love goodness. When the people returned to Jerusalem, it was Zechariah and Haggai who called upon them to build the walls with God's moral voice in their hearts, execute true justice, deal mercifully and compassionately with each other. Do not defraud the widow, the orphan, or the stranger and the poor, and do not plot evil against one another. But the people did not listen, and so Zechariah continued, speak the truth to one another. Render true and imperfect justice in your gates. You must love truth and peace. These are the values we need to build the walls of Jerusalem. We need truth and compassion, loving kindness and justice. And how do we take all of that and build it here in our city? Before we answer that question, we must remember that Jerusalem was destroyed not once, but twice. The rabbis in the Talmud teach us that it was destroyed by senseless hatred, by good people standing idly by in silence when evil reared its ugly head. The Hebrew word for Jerusalem is Yerushalayim. It takes on the form of a plural word. West Jerusalem and East Jerusalem, new and old. No, we are talking about an earthly Jerusalem and a heavenly Jerusalem. The rabbis imagine that a heavenly Jerusalem is an alternate to the real imperfect Jerusalem. Heavenly Jerusalem is a perfect place. There are no poor. No woman ever miscarries there, they teach us. The fires on the altar were never put out by rain, and no one was ever stung by a serpent or a scorpion. It is a far cry from the Jerusalem on earth, which has poverty and crime and injustice like every other city. And Rabbi Jeff Salkin teaches us that this idea exists in Christianity as well. In the book of Revelations, John sees the new Jerusalem descending from heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband in gold and precious stones. In the Christian tradition, heavenly Jerusalem was not real, it was an ideal. The rabbis of the Talmud teach us that we should turn our hearts and pray towards the heavenly Jerusalem. This means that they want us to ensure that earthly Jerusalem is a reflection of the heavenly model. While God can create whatever God wants in heaven, we have to do the work we need to do to make it so on earth. And Rabbi Naftali of Ropshitz, a great Hasidic teacher, reminds us, by our service to God, we build Jerusalem daily. One of us adds a row, another only a brick. When Jerusalem is completed, redemption will come. This is where we come in. We are building Jerusalem each and every day. Like the times it has been built before, we must build it up with stones of love and mortar of justice and bricks of truth. We have a vision of a heavenly Columbus in our hearts. And right now, earthly Columbus is far from mirroring that vision. But Bread has a roadmap, and we are advocating to implement every step. Last week, City Council allocated funds for the NNSC Group Violence Intervention Initiative. Bread has a plan to continue to implement restorative practices in our schools. Bread has a plan for a municipal ID program that could bring access to services for 100,000 residents. Bread has a plan to set up worker-owned cooperatives to break down barriers of employment for the unemployed and the underemployed. Bread has a plan for elder care that expands the Spark program, which will pair social workers with EMS and first responders on 911 calls and connect older adults to the services they need. Bread has a plan to increase affordable housing where city developers will set aside units for those making less than $42,000 and will increase the Affordable Housing Trust. Bread has a plan to bring police reform to our city, and we are going to learn more about that plan tonight. By implementing these plans, we can take steps to build a new Columbus. They are the stones and the bricks we need to build it better. We will build our city stone by stone and brick by brick so that our home becomes a home in which the old shall sit in the city squares and where the young shall sing and dance. Now is the time to double down and chase after justice. We are tired of gunshots. We are tired of racism. We are tired of poverty. When we join together and advocate for these solutions, we build a better home for all of us. We bring about redemption. Bread rises.
Good evening. Tonight, you will hear from 4 of our committees. Please note that our campaigns for municipal ID, juvenile justice, our campaign to build worker-owned businesses in Linden, and elder care are still ongoing. You will not hear a report from them this evening, but we plan to share updates at upcoming meetings. Now, with that being said, I'll call on Don Brown to share about our efforts with the DART network around environmental justice. Mr. Brown?
Impacted by climate problems. But sometimes it can be hard to identify these stories. In January, the DART network launched a Careful Creation Committee so that justice organizations like ours can uncover how environmental problems are affecting our community. The first year is solely focused on researching and identifying the questions so that we can surface stories this fall. Karen Martin and myself are representing Bread on the National Committee, and we need your help during these meetings. Only by sharing your personal experience can we tackle environmental problems here in Franklin County. I personally decided to get involved because of the fact that I have asthma, and I've had it ever since I was a child. I thought that I grew it and later moved to California, but when I came back to Ohio, it even got worse. As a child, I had to be inside all the time, except for school and doctor's visit for shots that I received every day. I remember in the 2nd grade having an asthma attack and having to be put in an oxygen tent in the hospital. Doctors explained to me that I couldn't go outside and play because it was hard to regulate the pollen and also the fumes from vehicles and smoke from the companies that were polluting. And living near a freeway, it affected it even more, as luckily to survive. That's why when I learned that Black children were twice as likely to develop asthma as their peers, I knew that we had to do something to prevent future generations from going through what I did. Through our research, we also learned that Black Americans are 75% likely to live close in proximity to oil and gas facilities, which emit toxic air pollutants. Because of these factors, community often suffer higher rates of cancer and asthma. Anyone living in these neighborhoods are affected. And if they don't have the income to move, they're stuck there. So myself and other members, that hits close to home. This disparity is directly affecting people like us in our neighborhoods where injustice has already caused such hardships. We need to do something about this. It's easy to feel disconnected from our climate. However, these issues are affecting our lives every day, such as our health, affordabilities for homes, and even our utility bills. We started to meet with other experts and other organizations to learn more about these issues and you are welcome to listen in. Contact your team members to join these research meetings and help us uncover stories like mine during the process this year. If climate problems are affecting you, please be sure to share them in your house meeting.
Good evening, everybody. I'm John Groner from Congregation Fereth Israel. My wife and I have been attending the Nehemiah Action and bringing along others since Bread started. I'm a pediatric surgeon and I've practiced in Columbus for almost 30 years. A few weeks ago, one of my work days started and ended with a child undergoing emergency surgery for treatment of gunshot wounds. Fortunately, both of these children survived, but one of them almost did not. In fact, when we started the operation, I was quite afraid that this child was going to bleed to death. Why was I afraid? Because I could feel his blood dripping off the operating room table and into my shoes. It took a huge effort from a team of doctors, nurses, and blood bank technicians to save this child's life. But in fact, we did. But we're seeing far too many children with gunshot wounds in Columbus. In fact, the pandemic triggered a major increase in the number of children getting shot. The number doubled in 2020 compared to the previous year. Now, the pandemic is finally easing, but the shooting has continued unabated. The city's efforts to curb firearm injuries has not shown significant results. For nearly 20 years, various agencies have been asking the city to partner with David Kennedy and the National Network for Safe Communities, whose strategies to reduce firearm violence are among the most effective in the country. 3 Columbus police chiefs and 2 mayors have rejected the successful strategy for reducing violence. For the past 6 years, Bread has struggled to move our city leaders to implement what has proven to work in other cities. For years, we heard that we don't have a gang problem and that we have one of the best police departments in the country. When the violence and murders continued to hit historic levels, we were told that the city could replicate the NNSC model on its own. Meanwhile, the shooting has continued and more children are getting hurt and killed. Last week, the Columbus City Council approved the transfer of $350,000 from the general budget to extend a contract with David Kennedy and the National Network for Safe Communities. This is a huge victory for Bread and a huge victory for the residents of Columbus. What does this mean? It means that we'll see a shift in the culture of policing in Columbus. Instead of treating entire neighborhoods as potential criminals through often unwarranted police stops, police will be targeting their efforts on identified small groups with known and documented histories of violence. It means that agencies across the city that have operated in silos to address violence will begin working together with a common focus, strategy, and message. Law enforcement, courts, social service agencies, and religious communities will all be working together to stop the violence. Most importantly, it means that fewer people will lose their lives. Most cities working with the NNSC model have observed an average of a 40% reduction in firearm-related murders. In Columbus, that's roughly 70 saved lives per year. And for me, it means that I'll have fewer children in the operating room, fewer families to share bad news with, and hopefully fewer lives lost, and hopefully cleaner shoes. On Monday, May 11th, we will celebrate the efforts of the Department of Safety and other officials who have been vital to getting us to this point. At this point, we understand that Council Member Elizabeth Brown, Chief Judge Stephen McIntosh, and City Prosecutor Tyack will be in attendance. We also celebrate all of you for all the work you have done in encouraging others to get involved. Over the coming months and years, our committee will continue to follow up with the key officials to ensure that the group violence intervention strategy continues and is implemented with fidelity and appropriate funding. Bread rises.
Well, I am happy that we can celebrate this victory on reducing gun violence. We will have to keep up the pressure on the city. We have to make sure that they really do set up the group violence intervention so that we can save lives and give people back their neighborhoods. Let me explain what I mean. Last year, I decided to downsize. A family member and I planned to move in together to look after each other and save some money. We found a place on the north side of town. It was pretty affordable and we were excited. Shortly after moving in, we went to Cleveland for the weekend to visit family. We returned, we found our new place had been shot up. Our houses was one of 8 houses that got shot up that night. 2 family members were actually in our house that weekend while we were gone. Thankful they weren't killed. We came home to glass busted out, the front door was shot out, and there were multiple bullet holes in the walls. It took us 2 months to clean up. We're still trying to get answers on what caused the shooting. Neither of us felt comfortable living there anymore. In fact, I was so shaken up by this, I started at times living in my car until I found a new place to live. No one should have to feel this way. Someone might say, just move to another neighborhood, but it's not that simple. Finding a new place was hard. I needed something affordable. I saw places that cost $1,200 to $1,500 a month. They were for 1-bedrooms, studios, and garden styles. Who can afford that? I couldn't afford it on a single income. I also looked at senior citizen places, but they were in Burlington, Hilliard, Upper Arlington, and other areas that I couldn't afford. I eventually found the place, but it took 4 months. Remember, I said that I lived in my car while I was looking for a place to live. Imagine if I had small children, and who would have been living in my car with small children? People in our community do this every day. It should not be this way. My story turned out okay, but think about the dozen of families that live on my block who couldn't move. No one should be forced out of their neighborhood due to gun violence. No one should struggle to find safe, decent, affordable place to live. Please get at least 3 people to join you at the Nehemiah Action so that we can reclaim our neighborhoods.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Charles Leister. I'm Senior Pastor at New Beginning Christian Center. I'm joining Wendy tonight to update you on the campaign for Families First and Housing Now. As illustrated from Brenda's testimony, you can tell that our housing fight is not over. Despite the federal moratorium to stop evictions and the millions of dollars to help people stay in their homes, hundreds of people continue to be evicted in Franklin County every day. Is this acceptable? No, absolutely not. In addition to evictions, over 50,000 families in Franklin County still spend half or more of their paychecks on housing. We have a fact sheet in your packet that gives more details on housing costs, evictions, and other housing-related problems. If you've been following the news, you've read about millions of dollars coming into our community from the federal government and millions of dollars being spent locally on housing. Money is coming in, but we don't yet know if that money will help the people in our community who are the poorest of the poor. We are investigating where it's going and if it will go to the people who really need quality housing. We see this as an emergency. We see this as an emergency. We don't want to see this money line the pockets of the rich. If I might share a practical application, have you ever had a situation in your life, in your family, where there was an increase of income unexpectedly. It may, for example, have been a very large return on on your tax return. If we don't, have you had that experience that you spent that money, but then didn't realize, what did I spend it on? Where did it go? We find that when we have a great influx of money, if we do not have a plan on how to spend it, where the best needs are met by that money, and a discipline in spending that money wisely, little by little, it gets spent on other stuff and nothing gets solved. We're concerned that this might be the case concerning the millions and millions of dollars that's coming available to our communities in these coming months, that if we don't find a plan that's effective, we'll lose it into the other pockets of other people and not in the pockets of those who need it most. There are a lot of changes that are taking place in City Hall, and there is turmoil. But here is what you need to know. Our goal is to keep pushing for housing for the poorest of the poor. We will need your support in upcoming meetings and demonstrations. Be on the lookout for emails from our housing committee about this. In the meantime, here is what you need to know about what our housing committee will push for at the Nehemiah Action. The first solution, we are still pushing for more funding to the Affordable Housing Trust for families making less than $42,000 a year. We want to see this money come from the city and the county. This will lead to more affordable housing. Both the city and county invest a total of about $5 million per year to the Housing Trust, but more is needed. The estimate is we need at least $100 million to resolve the crisis. We have invited Franklin County Commissioner Kevin Boyce and Columbus City Councilwoman Shayla Faber to the action to respond to this. We will ask Commissioner Boyce to lead the county in investing an additional $6.5 million. We will ask Councilwoman Faber to advocate for Columbus to invest an additional $5 million. With new funding coming in through proposed federal legislation, we are confident that there is nothing that will stop our officials from making this happen. The second solution, we want to see housing developers prioritize building more affordable housing. We've all seen tons of housing being built in recent years, and much of it is not affordable. We have been working with Councilmember Faber for 2 years. Yes, 2 years on a plan to change this so that as housing continues to be built, 20% of those apartments will have lower rents so that low-income families can enjoy these new places. At this year's Nehemiah Action, we will ask Councilmember Faber to finally implement this plan. In our recent meeting with her, we have faced resistance. Even with that in mind, we know that there is too much at stake and want to push for workable solutions at the Nehemiah Action. If we can count on you to stand up for solutions with us, give me a thumbs up. Wendy?
Yes, Pastor Leister. We have to keep pushing for more affordable housing because many of our congregations still see homeless people sleeping in doorsteps. We are tired of hearing about the $50 million approved by voters, the $100 million from the business community, and so many other solutions, but not seeing real affordable housing for the poorest of the poor. We know that we can be successful. You may have heard about some of our victories in network meetings, but I would like to highlight our two most recent now. First, because all of us work together, we won nearly $70 million in emergency housing assistance for families across the state during this past year. Our driving protests and social media campaigns paid off. We want to give you, our network members, a round of applause for making this happen. Let's celebrate. In addition, after 2 years of working with housing groups and with council member favor, we achieved another victory. Last month, the City Council passed legislation to ensure that people with housing vouchers cannot be denied housing. Let's celebrate that too. So please, be sure to get at least 3 people to join you at the Nehemiah Action so that we can continue to stand up for our friends and loved ones who need housing. The way that we won victories last year, this year, and every year has been because of you, our network members, showing up and bringing thousands of people with you. Bread rises. I'll now turn things over to Brother Wynn.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that. I'm going to be sharing the the Police Reform Committee work that's been done. As I said earlier, in December, we formed the Police Reform Committee. I want to talk about some of those problems we uncovered in our research on the Columbus Police Department. For years now, Brent has said that life in Columbus is a tale of 2 cities, abundance and comfort next to scarcity and anxiety. Ours is the second most economically segregated city in the nation, and that economic segregation is coupled with racial segregation. Nowhere is the tale of 2 cities more apparent than in the area of policing. Policing is vastly different in Black neighborhoods than it is in white neighborhoods. A recent study by Tufts University found that in predominantly white neighborhoods studied, the police often act as responsive service providers. They are often quick, thorough, and helpful when citizens call, and they work collaboratively with residents and business owners to solve local problems. However, in predominantly Black neighborhoods studied, the police focus on intervening with tactics like investigatory stops, which many see as aggressive, intimidating, and overboard. Other studies show that these disparities in policing have life-changing and often deadly consequences. Franklin County has the highest rates of fatal shootings by law enforcement in Ohio and among the highest in the nation. More than 2/3 of people killed by Columbus police were Black, whereas Black people comprise less than 1/3 of the population. Only since cell phone videos of excessive force by police have become common, have many more white people come to realize what has been happening to people of color at the hands of the police all along. In Columbus, due to the history of aggressive policing in communities of color and high poverty, the police largely lack legitimacy with many of the people they serve. The recent killings of Casey Goodson Jr. and Andre Hill are not singular tragedies. Our research has found that these killings are really a result of a culture in the Columbus Division of Police that includes excessive use of force, toxic disregard for transparency, a culture of racism, and lack of mutual trust and respect between communities and police. When practices and policies fail to hold police management and officers accountable, the police appear to be above the law. The Police Reform Committee acknowledges that a great many Columbus police officers of all ethnic groups and genders are committed to doing a good job on behalf of all the citizens of the city. Based on our research, however, our committee has found the need for police reform is not driven by a few bad apples in the police division, but by a structure and culture of policing that tolerates outcomes of racism and discrimination. We also learned that the vast majority of calls to Columbus police involve non-emergency requests for help which do not require armed officers. Many of these involve mental illness, for which most police officers are ill-equipped to respond due to a lack of specialized training. Now, at this time, I want to introduce Adrienne Hood, who will be sharing her testimony regarding the death of her son, Henry Green, due to a police shooting. Adrienne?
Thank you, Brother Wynn, and thank you for all those who are here on this Zoom. As Brother Wynn said, my son was Henry Green V, and he was killed by Columbus police in 2016, June 6th. And for the sake of time, I did type, so forgive me for not looking, but I want to be respectful of your time. My son, Henry Green V, was killed by two plainclothes Columbus police officers in an unmarked vehicle. There were many witnesses who say they didn't immediately identify themselves. Collectively, these two officers had multiple excessive force complaints before they ever encountered my son. And Officer Rosen was caught on camera stomping the head of a handcuffed man just a week after being cleared by the grand jury in my son's case. As you can imagine, I have had a myriad of emotions, from devastation to just absolute rage. Both the physical and mental exhaustion tried to weigh me down, but I have put my full weight in trust in God. We, as the body of Christ, according to Micah 6:8, should always be leading the charge when it comes to injustice. It is my hope that we will be able to come together and push for accountability. While there are many ways accountability can happen, the focus of this group is peer intervention, where officers will feel safe and comfortable intervening. I believe that we are in a place where real restorative / reconciliation practices can happen. The murder of George Floyd has done one thing for sure, and that is resuscitate the hearts of most Americans. This is no longer an issue for Black, brown, and poor people to handle alone. It takes all of us. We need you to be calling your elected officials safe, that keep safe for all people. I look forward to seeing you at the Nehemiah action. And again, I thank you for your time this evening.
And thank you, Adrienne, for sharing your testimony. We really appreciate that. Now, at this time, I'd like to introduce Diane Peters, who will be sharing her testimony regarding her interactions with police when they respond to a mental health crisis of a loved one. Diane?
Thank you, James. I asked my loved one if I could share his story. And he is a grown man that lives with bipolar disorder. And he said no. So I'm going to tell you my story, how it felt for me to call for help and to have the police come to my house and how they behaved while they were in my house. The first time I called them, I actually called 911 for an ambulance. The ambulance came, but there were 3 police cars that came before the ambulance got there. And so, of course, I took them upstairs to where I needed the help, and they kind of did not handle the situation very well at all. They poked, they joked, they made very light of the situation that I felt was very serious. And even when the ambulance people came with the stretcher, they had to ask some of the police to please move. And that happened not only one time, but several times when I've called 911 for help. Later on, once I knew about the CIT officers, the crisis intervention trained officers, 2 people came to my house, 2 officers. Both were very calm. One officer stayed with me. The other officer walked down the street to find my loved one. And after I talked to the officer who was with me for a while, we walked down the street to see what was going on. And we walked down the street. We went across the around the corner and across another street, and there sat my loved one with the CIT officer. They were just sitting on a step and they were talking. Why couldn't I have gotten this kind of response the first few times I called? It was like night and day. The police officers who are not trained in CIT techniques, they do more damage than good. We need a change, and we need it now. Thank you very much. Cathy, I believe you're next.
Yes. Thank you, Diane, so much for sharing this story. And thank you to Ms. Adrienne Hood for sharing her harrowing story of her tragic loss. And I hope if you share the feelings that I share, you'll turn those feelings into motivation to bring 3 or more people to Nehemiah so that we can stop things like this from happening ever again. In addition to studying the problems around policing, our committee has looked extensively at solutions being used around the nation to reimagine public safety in such a way that all neighborhoods feel more safe and secure. We have looked at hiring practices and policy changes, but our research leads us to believe that neither will lead to change without transforming the structure and culture of policing to one that establishes legitimacy and trust. Here are some of the potential solutions we are looking at. First, restorative practices. Brent has seen how use of restorative practices in schools has replaced suspensions of children for behavioral issues with healing and closer teacher-student relationships. Likewise, the National Network for Safe Communities and others have established trust and legitimacy between police and communities they serve using restorative practices. This will open up communication between law enforcement and the community to allow for greater understanding between them and build trust, vital to changing police culture. Second, active bystander training for police. There's a program called ABLE, Active Bystander Training for Law Enforcement. It's an evidence-based training program for law enforcement from Georgetown University School of Law's Innovative Policing Project. Too often, we see one police officer stand by and do nothing as his or her partner or another officer causes unnecessary harm to a person. Think about the murder of George Floyd. ABLE, if implemented with fidelity, may bring about a change in police culture that encourages peer intervention. ABLE alone will not create the complete culture change needed, but if paired with other major changes, it may make a significant difference. Third, reassigning roles to appropriate personnel. In Eugene, Oregon, the city contracts with a mental health agency called Cahoots. When a 911 call involves a person with mental illness, Cahoots answers the call instead of the police. Think of Diane's story about the night and day difference between trained people and the police answering those calls. The contract between Cahoots and the city of Eugene has saved the police millions of dollars and has provided those suffering from mental illness with treatment instead of arrest, incarceration, or armed force. We challenge Columbus to work with us on developing models for using unarmed, trained personnel to respond to non-emergencies, including mental health. And we hope someday traffic stops, so tragedies like the killing yesterday in the Minneapolis suburbs of a 20-year-old a warrant for an expired car registration who got shot to death won't happen. Choice of a new police chief. According to our research, cities that are making progress in changing police culture are led by police chiefs who are strong advocates for reform. Mayor Ginther's selection of a new chief will be an important element in establishing legitimacy and trust between police and the community. Since Mayor Ginther plans to announce his choice in May, we have little time to influence his choice. We have developed a sign-on letter that we are asking all of you to sign and email or mail to Mayor Ginther. The letter is in tonight's packet and also on the Bread website. Finally, we have met with Deputy Director of Public Safety, Craig Stone, and have shared both our anger at current levels of distrust, as well as the solutions we believe will strengthen trust and legitimacy. He has committed to attend the Nehemiah Action, and we will have a follow-up meeting with him on April 20th to discuss the details. We know these solutions will take time and will not be easy and will need the power of organized people. Please make sure you get at least 3 people plus yourself to either log in or drive in to the Nehemiah Action so that justice will roll down like an ever-flowing stream and bread will rise. Thank you.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. I'm Jim Lowe, a deacon from First Congregational Church. I'm lucky to be part of a team that's working on the logistics for the Nehemiah Action. This year, every member in all of our congregations should participate, every member, because we can attend in person or we can join virtually. We're planning to fill 450 parking spaces at the First Church of God on Refugee Road on May 11th. Each congregation's team should already have set a goal for how many vehicles they'll expect at the Nehemiah Action, and those teams will be coordinating who will be attending. Please let one of the team members or your clergy know if you want to attend in person. Those attending in person are expected to remain in their vehicles throughout the event unless you need to use the restroom. We will have 2 portable restrooms and hand washing stations for your safety. Everyone will be required to wear a mask when outside of their car. We're working to secure an audiovisual company that's able to broadcast the event through your car radio. And we also plan to have Spanish translations through Facebook. We will not have a concession stand with food as we've had at the Celeste Center. Those who don't attend in person will be invited to join in a live feed video through YouTube. We're asking all who plan to attend, whether in person or virtually, to register in advance. In a moment, I'll invite one of our Bread staff, Lauren Muscott, to review the online registration process for you. But first, I want to share with you how many people you have already reported are committed to attend this Nehemiah Action. We know that many of you are continuing to invite people, and we want to encourage you to keep up that good work. As of tonight, your reports have committed that just under 1,000 justice seekers will attend. Keep in mind, our goal is to have 3,000 in attendance. And all of you good organizers out there know that the law of halves, that we have to have 6,000 committed if we expect to have 3,000 there, rules this event. So we still have a lot of work to do. Can we count on you? Will you all make sure to have at least 3 others join you on May 11th? If so, give me a thumbs up. Thank you. Now I'll ask Lauren to guide us through the registration process.
Lauren, you're muted.
Oh, there we go. Excellent. Thank you, Jim, for that. And let me start the slideshow here.
As Jim said, this is going to be a hybrid event and we will be registering folks. Thank you to everyone who registered for the rally tonight. That was a great dry run. Just so everyone knows, the slideshow will be sent to you as a PDF to refer to. So I'll be going through a lot of information, but you will have this to reference in the future. So if it's going a little fast, don't worry, you'll get a copy of this. So why do we need to register for the Nehemiah Action? As we've talked about tonight, our power comes from large numbers of organized people. So we need to know our numbers, we need to be organized, and we need to reach our people safely. And so why are we doing that online? Because we've had to adapt to stay organized and to stay safe during this pandemic year. Online ticketing is a safe and effective way to reach our people and to keep track of attendance. And a bonus of this is that we will get to track registration before the event so we can follow up with folks who need to be followed up with and know who's good to go and ready to attend. So the action will be hybrid, which means that you can attend virtually or you can attend in your car as a drive-in at First Church of God. Important, not the Celeste Center this year, First Church of God. An important thing to note as you're registering the people that you invite, to keep things running safely and smoothly, we need attendees to select the right ticket for how they plan to attend so that we can know who to expect and make sure everyone has the information they need. So you will have two options for tickets. You will have an online option, where we'll ask you to select the number of tickets equal to the number of people watching on the same device. So a family of 4 watching from home should select 4 online tickets. For the drive-in ticket, we ask that you select 1 ticket per vehicle. As we said at the beginning, talk with your team members about coordinating parking spots per congregation. But if you are selecting a drive-in ticket, make sure it's 1 ticket per vehicle. There are only 450 parking spots. So we need to make sure that we have an accurate count of how many of those spots are taken. And importantly with this, all tickets are free. This is just a way for us to keep track of who's attending and how. There's no cost, no fees in registering for the event. So something that came up with the rally, can I help others by registering for them? And the answer is absolutely yes. If your invitees struggle with technology or are struggling with the website, you're welcome to register their tickets for them by either starting a new order on their behalf or adding them onto your registration. But try to do number 1 as much as possible, since that will allow us to contact them more directly. So you will register using this link below, and this will be emailed to you separately as well. And again, this whole presentation will be emailed to you as well. But this is what the website will look like. So you'll see here, there's your register for the action. You'll just click that button, which will take you to this page. You'll have the option of online attendance, which is free, virtual attendance only, and drive-in attendance, 1 ticket per vehicle. See that online attendance has an unlimited number. Feel free to select as many as are watching on the same device. But for drive-in, we've limited it to 1 or 2. You should really only be registering for 1 vehicle. So for this example, I've selected 3 online attendants because we're all striving to get 3 folks to come with us to the action. And so once we select the number, we hit next, and that will take us to this form. This is where we get the important information to contact you and make sure you get your ticket. So you'll include your name, your email so that you can get set the ticket. And then we ask for drive-in tickets, how many will be in your vehicle? So you will have the option to list however many will be in your car with you. You'll also have the option, as you see below, to list folks' names as well for drive-in tickets. So for each attendance or attendee that you include or buy a ticket for, so since I bought 3 tickets, I'll have the option to list each of their names. You can select a congregation, whether they're a network member. This is basically our ticket that we use for all of our other Nehemiah actions, just in virtual form. So all of our congregations are listed, and you can type in your congregation if it isn't currently a bread congregation. We'd love to know where you're attending from. But all of our member congregations are listed. You'll be able to select them, whether you're a network member. So this is what a completed attendance form would look like. And then once you're done, you'll scroll down to the bottom and hit next. You'll click here to complete this order, and you'll be given this. This will have the event link with the YouTube page. Will be streaming on YouTube. And for drive-in ticket holders, you will be given directions on how to get to the action. So you'll also be sent a separate ticket, which will look like this. This is really important for the drive-in attendees. For online folks, you just need that link that will be included in your receipt or confirmation email. Once you have that, you're good to go. But for our drive-in attendees, we ask that you bring this ticket either on your phone or print it out so that we can quickly register folks as they come in. So with that, I know that was a lot of information, but we'll be sending this out, and feel free to get in touch with your organizer or team member with more information.
Hello, I'm Vince Ford, Senior Minister of the Church of Christ of Genesee Avenue. And over the last year, we have seen tumultuous times of men and women of color who were killed locally and across this country. If you've turned your television on, I imagine you've seen the various updates that have flown across your TV screen. People losing their jobs and homes, and people dying from the COVID-19 virus. Many of us were impacted greatly. Some of us were impacted in ways that inconvenienced us by not being able to travel or do things that we enjoy. I personally haven't seen my grandmother since Thanksgiving of 2019. All were faced with the realities of the uncertainty that lay before us. And it gave us time to think.
I'm Joel Miller, pastor of Columbus Mennonite Church, and I've done a lot of thinking, speaking of thinking, over the last 3.5 years. That's roughly the amount of time Edith Espinal lived in our church building at Columbus Mennonite. Her choice to enter sanctuary was what enabled her to stay in the US with her family and not be deported. And her persistence and perseverance is what enabled her to outlast the previous administration and finally get some relief, the opportunity to live at home with her family in Columbus. This last year, each of us got a little taste of the disruption, lack of ability to plan for the future, and isolation Edith endured for that longer period of time. One of the gifts of Edith's struggles was that it made visible the hardships of so many folks like her whose lives are often invisible. That too was a big theme of this past year. We are now all the more aware of the great disparities that have existed among us. And we're perhaps more aware of the inner drive within ourselves that says this is not okay. We don't always know what the correct solution is, but we're more convinced than ever that something is not right. And we need to be a part of collective efforts to address these ills and build up the common good.
Edith's struggle as a brown person in this country reminds me of the struggles of Black and brown community as a whole, and of so many other marginalized groups in this country. So I work for Justice and Bread, also fight to make sure that families can stay together and live without fear. What do I mean? Well, we want to make sure that there is affordable housing for families so that families don't get split up in homeless shelters due to eviction. We want to make sure that kids can stay in school and out of the court system due to restorative practices. We want to make sure that families don't get split up because they lost a loved one due to gun violence. We want to make sure that families don't lose loved ones at the hands, knees, or weapons of officers. Amen, somebody. We want to make sure that people get a local ID that will give them access to opportunities. We want to make sure that people returning to our community from jail or prison can get good paying jobs to support themselves. We want real change now.
And as for that real change as bread, we have to be prepared for tension. One of the members of our congregation talks about the squirm factor. He told me recently he knows it's a good sermon if he can feel himself squirm a bit. Mm-hmm. And I like that criteria. If we're squirming even just a bit, it means we're recognizing that we can't just sit back in our chairs. There is a time for comfort, but there is also a time for moving outside of our comfort to join the Spirit in the difficult and challenging work of confronting injustice. Let's call it the holy squirm. This is connected to what we mean in bread when we talk about tension. Tension stretches us. It causes mental and emotional strain. Tension among us is a reminder that all is not well. And sometimes we need to be stirred out of a false peace in order to create a more just peace. Tension happens when we push to make our community more like the city of God. And tension gets pretty specific in our work. Like when we ask our officials to implement a particular solution to a problem and they say no, and we say yes, and they say no. And there you have it, tension. There's tension in any negotiation, and we see tension as an early sign that the previous status quo is actually starting to shift.
Dr. King said that true peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is the presence of justice. We cannot be afraid of tension and then desensitized to trauma. From the reports of our research committees tonight, I can tell you that we'd better be prepared for a little discomfort on May 11th at the Nehemiah Action. We sent out invitations to our officials in December and again last month. We will pray for positive commitments and prepare for objections that our officials may raise. We like it when officials say yes. I think everybody likes it when people say yes and follow through with their commitment. The truth is they don't always say yes, or say yes immediately, or say yes and follow through with their commitment. So your job as network members is to make sure that the 3 people or more that join you virtually or in person at the action are prepared for the uneasiness that they may feel at the event. What do I mean by this?
Uneasiness of the event. Brother Ford, I think what you mean is over 50,000 families in Franklin County are spending more than half of their income on housing. We have a problem. And at the Nehemiah Action, we're going to be asking our officials to do something about this. We want to celebrate what we've done so far, but there is more that's needed.
Yes, yes. And when neighborhoods in Columbus, like where our congregation is located, hear an increase of gunshots, and after a year of a record number of people losing their lives, we have a problem. We're going to continue to push our officials to implement the group violence intervention the right way, meaning with fidelity, so that we can save lives. Related to that, we can expect there to be lots of tension when we ask our safety officials to implement policy changes within the police department.
We can expect that it's not going to be easy to win a solution, but give a thumbs up if you feel like this is work worth doing. And if you're willing to accept that tension is an important component of this work, give me another thumb.
That's true.
All right, I'm seeing the thumbs. We're glad you're still with us. Now, if our officials get to the action and we all get to yeses, we're going to celebrate. But if you've been in this work for a while, you know it's both important to celebrate and know that a yes response doesn't always mean what you hope it might mean. And a no response doesn't mean that we've reached a dead end. Edith got a few small yeses and a whole lot of no's along the way before the bigger yes that enabled her to return home. And she's still needing some more crucial yeses, most importantly, a yes for official permanent resident status. Still working on that. Our officials might not say yes. In fact, they might say everything but yes. They may say how big the problem is. They may talk about how they're already working on this. They may say they need to do more research. They may say they need to work with more people in the private sector. Our insistence, though, on yes, isn't just an attempt to win an argument. It's a matter of advocating for and with our friends and loved ones who would benefit from these solutions.
If we get anything less than a yes, the leaders on stage need to know that they have the support of our people and that we will support them even when times get tough. So if we can count on you to support our spokespeople, give them a thumbs up.
Okay, so this is a recurring theme this evening, that we need all of you, all of us, to get at least 3 people to join you in attending or watching the Nehemiah Action. We need at least 3,000 people watching and in person, so that when we share with our officials the number of people who joined, they'll know that people are paying attention, that this is a priority, and that we want justice, because bread rises.
Good evening. I'm Rabbi Lynette from Temple Beth Shalom. We just heard from Brother Ford and Reverend Miller that we need to be prepared for tension at the Nehemiah Action. About 2 weeks ago during our Passover Seders, as we do every year, Jews around the world held up a piece of unleavened bread or matzah, as our ancestors didn't have time to let their bread rise in the rush to flee Egypt. At our Seders, we call our matzah the bread of affliction, and we say, this year we are still enslaved people. Next year, may we be free. So what does this mean? We don't just retell the Exodus story for its own sake. It's an exercise in empathy and action for this current moment. We are still in Egypt, and the struggle towards freedom is still ongoing for so many marginalized groups that we may or may not personally identify with. And the bread of affliction symbolizes not just the suffering of our ancestors, but affliction experienced by people everywhere, those who are different from us. This idea also resonates in the famous saying by Fannie Lou Hamer, nobody's free until everybody's free. The horrific and senseless deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and so many others who lost their lives to police violence and racism last year lit a spark of protest last summer around the world. Along with the protests here in Columbus, I was also honored to participate in Bread's protest in December as we responded to police violence here in Columbus after Casey Goodson Jr. and Andre Hill were killed. Even after the protests, all of us in Columbus continued and still continue to stand together against racism. And we shared in this bread of affliction again recently as mounting anti-Asian racism intersected with misogyny culminated in a horrific attack in Atlanta in which 8 people lost their lives. The fight for justice and the tension within it also often feels like an endlessly uphill battle with so much iniquity and loss in our country, especially amid the coronavirus pandemic this past year. But no matter how often we are told that systemic change is inconvenient or too difficult or too uncomfortable, we cannot give up. Rabbi Hillel from our ancient Jewish text Pirkei Avot asks, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? But if I am only for myself, who am I? And if not now, when? The bread of affliction is also a symbol of hope. When we hear another's pain and when we share the bread of affliction with each other with empathy and openness, seeing each other in our humanity, we can commit to meaningful steps towards justice for all marginalized groups, not just our own. We must all share in the bread of affliction to keep educating ourselves, to keep our hearts open to hearing one another's stories and their visions of justice. May that give us strength as we push back against complacency and the status quo for real change. May that give us the courage to renew our commitment every time we hear no or not right now, and to respond, if not now, then when? May our unleavened bread of affliction rise to give us the will to stand together in the long fight against all forms of injustice, racism, and oppression. Bishop Lafayette.
Rabbi Lynette, after the events of the last year and throughout our lifetimes, our community has experienced tremendous trauma and pain and loss. COVID-19 and the global pandemic have amplified the health disparities inside of our communities. And over-policing, abuse of authority, disparity in sentencing based on race and economic standing has led to racial unrest. Economic, both disparity, both gulfs and gaps are visible and are apparent like never before. The new poor are middle-class families, which have been impacted and devastated by the economic downturn based on the global pandemic. Now, we build power of organized people. And when we do that, we move people out of powerlessness and despair to hope and the power. We confront corrupt systems and hold systems accountable. Our justice listening process, we are able to hear the lament of our community. Have you ever been so overcome with anguish that you not only feel overwhelmed with sorrow, but utterly and completely and so despairingly alone, as if no one on earth could possibly understand the depth of your pain? In times like these, we need to remember that God is there and he is ready to shoulder the burdens and the sufferings and the distress and the despair with us. Our sacred texts are full of laments. My question is, where is the power to offset the demonic power of despair? And where's the power that could offset the effects of the alluring call? How are we going to keep the demonic forces back and under control? This is not the time for silence and neutrality. Deuteronomy chapter 30, it says, "For this charge I am enjoining you with today is not beyond your power or beyond your reach. The matter is near you. It's in your mouth and it's in your mind for you to overcome." Micah says, "He has shown you what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with our God?" You see, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel simply says, we too are ministers of the sacred, or we are slaves of evil. Our justice work lets our community know that it's never wrong to cry out to God. God hears our pain and he welcomes us close. Our justice work is doing what is apparent in the sacred.
Okay.
Our relentless
I got you.
lift up the weight of despair from our community. Hope is a confident expectation. Hope is an expectation for favorable change. Hope is an anchor for our soul, and hope gives focus to our faith. We stand against the empire of fear and its narrative of scarcity and despair. Doing justice brings a narrative of love and of abundance and of hope to our communities. Doing justice is not just talk, it's action. And I agree with Rabbi Heschel. We too, today, are either ministers of the sacred or slaves.
Peanut butter.
Praise God.
And one.
At this time, I want to remind you that not only will we be together on May 11th for our Nehemiah action, but I want you to prepare yourself also that on June the 28th, we will have our bread celebration. We'll celebrate the wins that we have at our Nehemiah action. We'll kick off our investment drive where we want to encourage every one of you to invest as a Justice Network member, $200 or more, in order to maintain and move forward with this justice effort. At this time, we're going to leave you with this video. And so if you'd like to take it.
All right, give her waiting balance.
A lot of people see justice as the most futile thing you can do with your life. Give your life completely to business and you see the money piling up. Be a health nut, eat right, go to the gym, and your muscles will grow and your body will look good and you'll see results. But when it comes to justice, it seems like you just can't get ahead. You patch up one hole and something else rips open. You bring peace to one region and war breaks out in another. You rebuild after an earthquake and a tsunami hits, and you work and you work and you work, and there's never any profit. There's no bank where you can store a surplus amount of justice in. Stability is never permanent. Something always tips, and people always ask, is it even worth it? And that question, though understandable, quite frankly, it's ridiculous. And it rarely comes from those who are actually tired from pursuing justice and not just tired of the idea. It rarely comes from people who've labored for years and have good reason to ask it. And you know why they never ask? Those type of people become friends with those who suffer. Family even. Because it's one thing to wonder if someone else's freedom is worth fighting for. But when you begin to identify with that someone else, commune with them, that's when the question is no longer worth asking. That's when it becomes offensive even. What do you mean, is it worth my time? That doesn't even deserve an answer. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how many times we fail. I don't care how little progress is made. You never stop fighting for your own.
I want you to all unmute at this time, all unmute, because I want to ask a question that was asked in that video. Everyone unmute. Everyone unmute. Yes.
Yes. Hello.
Yes.
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 Yes, it's working. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, it is working. Yes, it's worth it. It's worth it.
With that being said, I would like to close with our bread prayer, but I would like us to remember what's at stake. Oh God, to those who have hunger, give bread.
Give bread.
And to those who have bread,
Give the hunger for justice.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to give it about
Thank
5
you.
minutes. 5 minutes for people to log off, and then board members.
Hey Rob, this is Clarissa. If you could also stop the live on YouTube, I think only you can do it as the host.